Hello and welcome to today's episode of Court Matters. Today we focus on the Gibbons v. Ogden case, also known as the Steamboat case. The issue started when Robert Livingston and Robert Fulton, who invented a successful steamboat, were granted exclusive navigation rights and a monopoly of waterborne commerce in the New York waters by the state of New York. Later on, Livingston gives Ogden its license to operate steam ferry boats in the waters between New Jersey and New York. Thomas Gibbons was another man who operated under a coasting license, but unlike Ogden, his license was granted by the federal government, not by the state of New York. Because Gibbons did not have a New York license, Ogden did not believe Gibbons had the right to navigate the waters, and thus the two of them went to court to solve the problem. The following is a dramatized account of what really happened.
Gibbons, what do you think you're doing? You know the state of New York granted me a monopoly over interstate maritime commerce on the Hudson River between here and New Jersey.
That may be true, even though I think it's unconstitutional, but I have a license from the federal government that allows me to sail on the Hudson River. I can continue my ferrying business. What, can't handle the competition?
I don't have to. Since you live in New Jersey, you don't have a license in New York. I'll make sure you're denied landing rights.
You do that, and I'll be sure we're going to court.
This court rules in favor of Ogden. The authority of the states and of the federal government are equal in jurisdiction, so the federal coasting license of Thomas Gibbons does not supersede the monopoly granted by the state of New York to Ogden. This New York State Court is now adjourned.
This isn't over, Ogden. I'll see you in Supreme Court. Bring it!
The court is now in session.
Your Honor, I appeal to the Supreme Court to overturn the ruling of the New York State Court, which took away my federal rights to navigate its waters. The New York State Court stated that Ogden's monopoly has the power to override my federal license, which came from the 1793 Congress Act regulating ships employed in coastal trade. Since this is a federal law, it should supersede the state laws.
Your Honor, I have been forced to come here today to defend my New York monopoly because I believe that this man has no right to run his steamboat on my water. The 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution states that the power not delegated to the United States Congress by the Constitution nor prohibited by the state is reserved to the state or to the people respectively. The right to control interstate commerce belongs to the state as equally as it belongs to the federal government.
I cite Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It is stated that Congress has the right to regulate commerce for nations, and among several states. According to the Commerce Clause, the federal government has the power to control commerce between states. This means that New York cannot close off their ports to their own citizens, or me, and it cannot refuse admission to a particular state or nation, or grant a monopoly of trade. The legislation of Congress allows only Congress to regulate interstate trade. I beseech you to expand the definition of commerce to include broader areas than merely trade.
In the matter of Gibbons v. Ogden, the court has now come to a unanimous decision regarding the Gibbons v. Ogden case. After reviewing both sides of the argument, we rule in favor of Gibbons. Commerce, undoubtedly, is traffic, but it is something more. It is intercourse. It describes the commercial intercourse between nations, and part of nations in all its branches, and is regulated by prescribing rules for carrying on that intercourse. The act of a state inhibiting the use of waters or parts of any vessel having a license under the act Congress comes in direct collision with the constitutional prerogative granted to Congress under the Commerce Clause. The New York state law creating a commercial monopoly is void. The acts of New York must yield to the law of Congress and allow Gibbons to operate within the waters of the New York state. The court is now adjourned.
Hi, I'm Lily from the New York newspaper, and I'm here to interview the people in the Gibbons versus Ogden case, now popularly referred to as the Steamboat case. The first person I will be interviewing is Aaron Ogden. Whoa, sorry, I'm going to have to interview you. How do you feel about the results of the case?
Obviously, I disagree with Marshall's ruling. I believe that the definition of commerce in the Commerce Clause of the Constitution should not have been extended to include transportation.
So you're saying that you don't agree with the national supremacy concept that pervaded this case?
Obviously.
Okay, well, do you have any last comments you want to say?
Gibbons, you better watch out. I know where you live.
Okay, well, I guess the interview with Ogden didn't go too well, but now it's time to interview Thomas Gibbons. Hey, I'm going to interview you right now, and so, how do you feel about the case now that the Supreme Court has ruled in your favor?
I'm feeling good. I'm glad that the Supreme Court more clearly delineated the definition of commerce in terms of the Constitution. Take that, Ogden!
Now it's time to interview Judge Marshall. Hey, Justice Marshall, water, you doing? What? Never mind. Anyway, well, based on this case, Gibbons versus Ogden case, now popularly referred to as the Steamboat case, what do you think is the significance of this case?
Primarily, I believe we have established national supremacy, stated in the Supremacy Clause in Article 6 of the Constitution.
Oh yeah.
The authority of the states and the federal government are not equal, with the latter having the greater share of power while maintaining the individual rights of the former. This is a large improvement from the Articles of Confederation, which was weakened greatly by the fact that the federal government was not given the power to regulate interstate commerce or to collect taxes from the state. The prevailing motive for the drafting of the Constitution was to regulate commerce to rescue the nation from the embarrassing and destructive consequences resulting from the legislation of so many different states, and to place it under the protection of a uniform law. In a similar way, I also believe that this case served to solidify the Commerce Clause and thereby facilitate the further regulation of interstate commerce and the continued development of a national economy.
Thank you very much. Now I will be interviewing a Democrat and a Whig who have opinions on this case. As an outstanding member of the Democratic Party, what are your views on the Gibbons and Ogden case?
I am outraged that John Marshall has the audacity to rule in favor of Gibbons. Ogden obviously has the right to monopolize steam trade between New York and New Jersey, according to the state of New York. By ruling in favor of Gibbons, in essence, invalidating the monopoly that New York has granted, the Supreme Court has completely disregarded states' rights.
Completely disregarding the states' rights, you say? Okay, very interesting. But how does this affect you?
Well, I really don't dislike that John Marshall guy now. This case has shaken my belief in the government. I think that the federal government has too much power while the states don't have enough. Mark my words, you young whippersnappers.
Now I will be interviewing a member of the Whig Party. As a fervent Whig, do you support the Gibbons versus Ogden case?
I think Marshall did a good job, and I wholeheartedly back his decision. Interstate commerce does fall under the jurisdiction of the federal government, just like it says in the Constitution. Marshall is right in exerting the power of the federal government. Individual states need to understand that they are part of a union, and that union takes precedence over everything else.
What impact do you think this landmark decision will have on you and the people of this country?
Well, everyone will have access to the free trade along the Hudson River, and I feel reassured that the federal government can correct any unconstitutional rulings approved by the states.
This concludes our segment of Court Matters. Join us next week as we cover the O.J. Simpson trial. Good night.